Shoot, I'm late for school! Oh wait, I'm homeschooled. Wait, I actually graduated a while back, so suckers. August is usually the time when people return back to school. Unless you're one of those lucky fiends who get to return to school in September. I was never one of those. And while most people view August as nearing the end of summer, so sad, I'm more like... Now I know what you're thinking, and don't worry. The latest I talk about Halloween is right after 4th of July. And the earliest? Now, to combine both the dread of school and my love for spooky season, I decided to make monster designs based off of class subjects, specifically the most hated ones. And this is according to several different websites, so this is what I've seen overall. So coming in at the third most hated subject is history, which I completely understand. I hate anything that involves writing. I was pretty stumped on designing all of these. I would definitely say history was the least difficult, largely because there's so much that has happened in history that's pretty scary that I can pull from to make this creature. The first idea I had was making this character a three-headed creature to represent the repetitiveness of history. I decided to have the three heads represent different dark parts of history, like the war and plagues, and the middle one's supposed to be of conspiracies, because those tend to lean into like the darker ideas of what happened back then. And because of how old a lot of things are, they do leave a lot of room for the imagination. I also leaned more into the Egyptian side of it because I feel like Egypt is a good representation of history itself. Now for the plague head, I decided to lean into the Black Plague because that is probably one of the most deadly plagues that happened in history. And when I was looking up like how they often depicted the Black Plague or how it actually looked, a lot of them would use skull motifs, which I already planned to use for the war, so I was kind of trying to lean away from that and be more like a dying corpse. Then for the warhead, and for the war one, besides making it a skeleton for death, I also gave it a Roman helmet, just to lean back further in time for, history. This also led to me deciding instead of legs, it has a little pillar, Greek pillar. I don't remember what it's called, but I thought it would be kind of like a fun idea, kind of like an ancient statue that comes to life. Oh crap, this is not a museum. I almost forgot to draw the skeleton hand sticking out, but thankfully I caught that. Now, one of the other things that I wanted to do was put an ancient clock on the chest to represent time. And then I saw, I don't remember what these are called, but I decided to go with that because it seems to be like the oldest form of telling time. And I'm kind of running out of things to say about this one, so additional details, and here it is. If I'm going to be perfectly honest, this is probably my favorite one out of all of them. Which is kind of sad that this goes all downhill from here. Now the next one we're doing, being the second most hated school subject, is physical education, aka PE. Which I was quite shocked by this because I always thought PE was considered a very easy class because it's mainly participation. So I turned to the internet to figure out why people don't like PE, and it actually became very clear and realized that I've even gone through this myself. PE becomes a prime time for getting picked on and being bullied. Like in a classroom setting, you are pretty much just focusing on what's in front of you, and the room is generally really quiet, so no one can really get away with doing a lot of things. Versus PE being outside, you are a lot more exposed to being picked on for like how athletic you are or anything else like that. Especially if you have a crap PE coach like me back in middle school. I didn't have to worry too much in high school because again, I'm homeschooled. So for this character, I decided to make him jacked because, come on, it's PE. He's gonna be muscular, which was a fun thing to do because I do not do buff characters very often. I also put him in kind of more of an intimidating pose, trying to make him look like someone who would pick on you and not be very nice. And since sports seem to be the center for a lot of school mascots, I decided to fuse him with an animal that's considered really aggressive. I was aiming for the Nile crocodile because that was one of the ones that a lot of people talked about being really aggressive. There are so many animals that are considered aggressive, but I ended up going with this one because I felt like it could fuse rather nicely. And I tried to embody different sports on him, like having that little cage thing that football helmets have. I don't know what they're called. And also tried to add like the stitching on his hands, like for baseball, and in his hand I put a skull with like a crack on it that's like to represent a football. And I'm not quite sure if I like the cap that I put on him, but I didn't know what else to put. I felt like he needed something. I also colored him to kind of like represent a referee's shirt, and I also put whistles in his eyes because I feel like that goes with PE rather well. And while I was originally going to give him like actual teeth, like a crocodile, I decided to change it into this other mouth because I didn't want it to lean too much into like anthropomorphic animal. I wanted to try to keep it more as a creature versus an animal with human proportions. While I'm not the most proud of how this looks, I do think it did a pretty good job, and he does look pretty spooky, so I'll give him that. Now last, and certainly a lot of people's least, the most hated subject is indeed, you probably already guessed it, math. Which for me personally, I never really had a problem with math. I'm not saying I was extremely good at it, like maybe in my younger years, but as it got more difficult, I started struggling, but I was willing to take that over any form of reading or writing. Though ironically, the subject that people struggle with the most, I struggled the most with this monster. I have created several designs trying to figure out how I want it to look, and I ultimately ended up with the first one I did with some minor tweaks. Now for this one, I was going for more straight angled shape, then I decided to give it extra limbs for like multiplying, and then the idea of making the limbs look like different symbols. I don't know how well you guys can see it, but the top one's supposed to be the sum of symbol, and the bottom ones are supposed to be square root. And for the legs, I pretty much used a compass. I think that's what it's called. That's what it says when I looked it up. It's pretty much like that tool that makes perfect circles. And while having a calculator head seems pretty straightforward, I did make it a graph one, so it could like form a little smile on the face, you know, be a little creepy. I thought it was fun making the chest a chalkboard with all the math equations on it. I think my favorite part of this is taking the protractors and making them into like weapons on its hands. And I may have put a little bit of strawberry jam on it afterwards. I don't think that was in the recording. Anyway, so here's the end. I think it turned out pretty cool. Not particularly creepy, but I think it's pretty cool. Could be a little bit intimidating. And here's the final lineup. Let me know in the comments of which one you would choose as your teacher if you had to choose one. And I hope you guys have an interesting day. Thank you for watching.